You wake up because the cold reached you before your eyes did. The fire has burned down to embers. Your breath hangs in the air above the sleeping bench. Somewhere near your feet, you can hear an animal shifting in the dark. Because in this house, you are not the only one sheltering from the cold tonight. Outside, snow is pressing against the door. You have enough stored food to last, if you're careful, perhaps a few weeks. Winter here can last for months. There is no market to restock from. No neighbor with surplus to spare. Not once everyone's own stores start running low. Whatever you have right now in this house is largely what you and your household have to survive on until spring. And the way most people actually survived this had almost nothing to do with the sword and shield image you're picturing. It came down to logistics, decided months before the first snow ever fell. You don't need this house to be impressive. You need it to hold heat. This is a longhouse, a single long, timber-framed building, walls packed with moss or wattle and daub for insulation, roof layered with turf or sod so thick it can trap warmth like a blanket. There are no windows to speak of and barely any gaps for drafts, because every opening is heat leaking out into a night that will kill you if you let it. Down the center of the room runs the hearth, a long stone-lined fire pit, and the only real source of heat, light, and cooking fire in the entire building. There's no chimney, just a small smoke hole cut into the roof ridge, which means the air near the ceiling stays thick with soot, and everyone below learns to live low, close to the fire, close to the ground. And this is the detail that surprises people. In many of these households, you are not sleeping alone with your family. Livestock, cattle, sheep, sometimes pigs, are sheltered at one end of the very same building. Not out of laziness, on purpose. Animal body heat helps warm the house. In exchange, the animals get shelter from cold that would otherwise kill them. Your home isn't just where you live. It's a heat management system, built by people who understood exactly what they were up against. Here's your first real decision, and it's smaller than it sounds, which is exactly why it matters. Do you feed the fire generously tonight, driving off the worst of the cold? Or do you hold back because the wood pile stacked outside has to last for months, not days? This isn't dramatic. It's arithmetic. Every log you burn tonight is a log you don't have in 6 weeks, when the cold might be worse and your supply might be thinner. Firewood has to be gathered, cut, and dried well before winter arrives. Once the snow is deep and the days are short, replenishing it becomes far harder, sometimes close to impossible. So you hesitate. You add slightly less wood than you want to. That single hesitation, repeated night after night for months, is the actual difference between a household that makes it to spring with fuel to spare and one that doesn't. Nobody ever tells this part of the Viking story, but it might be the most important decision you make all winter. You might assume the fire is your biggest problem. It isn't always. You're not trying to survive one freezing night. You're trying to survive until spring. And that means the food stored in this house right now has to stretch across months where nothing new is growing. Different households, depending on region, relied on different combinations. Dried and smoked fish along the coasts, salted or smoked meat, stored grain, hard cheeses, and preserved dairy products. Root vegetables that could last in cool storage. Inland communities and coastal ones didn't eat identically. The resources available to a fishing settlement in Norway looked different from a farming household further inland, or in Iceland, where growing conditions were harsher still. What's consistent is the underlying problem. Everything in your stores has to be rationed against a winter whose exact length you can't know in advance. Eat too generously in the first months, and you risk running dangerously short before spring actually arrives. You look at the people sitting near the fire tonight. There are more of them than you'd like, given what's left in storage. And spring is still a long way off. Here's where the survival math gets genuinely difficult. Your livestock aren't simply property. They're food on the hoof, a source of milk and dairy through part of the winter, labor once spring plowing begins, and wealth in a very real economic sense. Animals a household could ill afford to lose. But animals need feeding too. Hay and fodder, gathered and stored during the warmer months, has to stretch across winter exactly like your firewood does. And when stores run critically low in a genuinely hard winter, a household could face an agonizing choice: Slaughter some animals now, converting them to food you can control and ration. Or keep feeding a shrinking store to a herd you're hoping survives intact until spring grass returns. There's no single right answer here, and no clean statistic historians can offer you about how often either choice was made. What we do know from archaeology and later written sources is that livestock losses during hard winters were a real and recurring danger across the Norse world, a threat serious enough that protecting animals through winter was treated as one of a household's central responsibilities, not an afterthought. This decision alone could shape whether your household thrived or barely scraped through the following year. Now, you can't simply walk outside in furs and shrug off the cold. That's the movie version. Real winter survival here depended on layering and material choice, and on one principle in particular. Staying dry mattered more than almost anything else. Wool was the backbone of Norse winter clothing, durable, and unlike many other fibers, still capable of retaining some warmth even when damp. Linen served as an inner layer against the skin. The furs and animal skins added an outer layer of insulation where available, though wool remained the everyday workhorse
The Norse
fabric,
layering
not
system
for
was
alone.
highly practical.
Here's the myth-busting moment worth sitting with. Cold itself wasn't always the biggest enemy. Wetness was. A wet wool cloak, a soaked pair of leather shoes, clothing that traps moisture against skin in freezing air. That combination could turn an ordinary cold day into a genuinely dangerous one, in ways dry cold alone often didn't. Staying warm wasn't about toughness. It was about staying dry, layer by layer, decision by decision. Weeks have passed. You've made it this far. But now the margins are tightening. Food stores that looked adequate in the first snowfall look thinner now. The wood pile is smaller than you'd like at this point in the season. Someone in the household has fallen ill. And in a world without modern medicine, illness during winter carried real danger, worsened by cold, poor ventilation, and close quarters shared with everyone else in the house. Travel has become genuinely hazardous. A journey that was simple in autumn could now mean days trapped by weather, far from shelter. This is the part of Viking winter that rarely makes it into popular imagination. Not a single dramatic crisis, but a slow tightening of every resource at once, week after week, with no way to know exactly how much more of the season remains. You've reached the hardest stretch. Food is low, fuel is low, the weather still isn't breaking. And here's the real answer to the question this video promised you. The people who made it through winters like this generally weren't the strongest warriors in the settlement. Physical toughness mattered far less than most people assume. What actually determined survival was preparation. Food gathered and preserved months in advance, firewood cut and stored before the first snow, shelter maintained and reinforced ahead of a cold, livestock protected and rationed carefully, and a household working together rather than each person fending for themselves. The Viking who survived winter wasn't necessarily the one who could swing an axe the hardest. It was the one who had already done the quiet, unglamorous work back in autumn, while there was still time to do it. So, did you survive? If you did, it probably wasn't because of one dramatic decision made in the depths of January. It was because, months earlier, someone stored enough grain. Someone cut and dried enough wood. Someone repaired the roof before the first heavy snowfall. Someone made the hard call about which animals to keep feeding and which to slaughter early. Someone rationed carefully enough night after night that the household still had something left when spring finally arrived. For most people in Viking Age Scandinavia, surviving winter wasn't a heroic battle fought in a single terrifying moment. It was a quiet battle fought every single day for months, mostly won or lost long before the first snowflake ever fell.